Beyond Survival is the official podcast of Waymaker Institute. Our desire is to equip you as a follower of Jesus to thrive. Each episode reveals how the gospel impacts the entire human experience for the advancement of God's kingdom. Ultimately, Jesus' promise of abundant life means we are meant to go beyond survival. So, let's jump in with today's episode.
Hey, welcome to the Beyond Survival podcast. Today we're going to be double dipping, if you want to say that, meaning that this particular episode, first of all, might be one of multiple. We'll see how it goes. But this particular episode is not just for the Beyond Survival podcast, but it actually is part of our Equip class at Waymaker Church. Mm-hmm. And Equip class is a brand new class launching. I'm actually going to introduce someone and then let her share a little bit more about the vision and purpose of this. But if you are familiar with the Beyond Survival podcast, you know we have a special guest, Lisa Hensley, the one and the only. And Lisa is the groups coordinator at Waymaker Church. She was, so Beyond Survival podcast is the official podcast of Waymaker Institute. Yep. We got some sponsors right here.
Oh, yeah.
Waymaker Institute.
You're repping. I forgot to rep.
And Adidas. By the way, they just don't know it yet. Lisa was an intern at Waymaker Institute for about 2.5 days.
Yeah, felt like that basically.
And then, which is really great because she was doing it part of her degree program, and then we actually hired her on staff, and which is awesome. It's a beautiful story. If you don't know Lisa, find her. If you're in the Lynchburg area, find her, ask her her story, because it's a really fascinating and beautiful story about God's work in her life and her family's life. So this is Lisa. Lisa, tell us about the Equip class. What is that, and even what role does this content play in that class?
Yeah, the Equip class is something that we've been designing as a team for people who are stepping into positions in the church. So maybe upcoming deacons or group leaders, or you're going to lead a volunteer team. We want
lay counselors.
Yeah.
Yep.
We want those people to feel like they've had training and preparation, that we haven't just said, hey, we want you to do this, and then just thrown them in to whatever it is. So we designed this to give them like a foundation of knowledge and skills that they can take with them into the work that they're doing for the church.
Yep. And so the Equip class is kind of a hybrid of online content, but also in person, which is the beautiful thing about technology and so forth. We recognize a lot of content can be done online and convenient for people who have busy schedules, but also there's something really powerful about in-person and discussion and making it really, really personal. So, and that's why you're here. You have if you don't know Lisa, meet her, ask her questions, but she has a brilliant mind.
This is a great podcast setup.
Thank you.
Because she's not going to love that I said this. One of the smartest people I know.
Yes.
So,
it is actually true. Like, she has a brilliant mind, and she has an incredible story, and I love that you're here, because I think even that you're here is a testimony. It's kind of a part of your testimony, what God's been doing in your life.
For sure. It's been a gift for me.
Yes. Yeah. So I'm excited for you guys to hear from Lisa, our friend, and really, really cool. A mom of 4 boys, right?
Yes.
4 boys.
4 boys.
Who play soccer. We saw you guys at the soccer field all the time.
That's right. That's right.
Yes. And then you and your husband married how many years?
15 and a half.
15. We're 15 this month.
See? Oh, congratulations.
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we got married the same year.
Yep.
Wow. 4 boys. Anyways, I don't even want to go
circus.
there.
Yeah.
Yes. So, so this episode is about leadership. So it is going to be, you're like, well, how are you going to do that in one episode? Which is why it might be 2.
Yeah.
And
that's right.
And the reality is we have a spiritual leadership class at the Institute, which is like 16, 17 weeks long of, 2 classes a week, 1.5 hours. So like there's a lot of content in this. We've reduced it down and then reduced it down and then reduced it down.
Even more so, yeah.
And so this won't be everything, but I think what this will help people do is really give a good framework or a foundation to leadership. Yeah. So we'll start kind of, maybe high level theory concept, and then we'll work our way down to more practical things. And if you're new to Waymaker Institute, if you're not familiar, it is to develop high capacity, high character leaders for the community, church, and nations. And we really want to develop these leaders. Because here's the deal: when you look around the world right now, it is in desperate need of great leaders.
Yeah.
Like I mean, politics, the church, businesses, corporations, community, every aspect of our world is in desperate need of great leaders, and that's what I'm really excited about this content. So.
Yeah. I mean, even leadership is I think my mind has grown to leadership as a skill, right? That can be learned. Some people are natural leaders and have natural giftings and natural personality or whatever. But like any other skill, like, maybe speaking, maybe some people might be more prone to it, but they still need to work on it. And leadership is the same idea, where it is a skill that can be learned. And I think the hard truth is, just because you are a genuine follower of Jesus does not guarantee
there it is.
You're a great leader. Yep. So you could be a great follower of Jesus and not be good at speaking in public. And you could be a great follower of Jesus and still struggle in leadership or need to grow and learn leadership. And so that's what we're here to do, talk about, hey, what is leadership? And then even maybe some small steps people can start taking away.
I want to say that again, because it cannot be assumed that just because you follow Jesus that you're a great leader. Although a lifetime of discipleship to Jesus should produce.
Well, it will help. Like definitely
it will help. Yes,
will grow in you.
Leadership is a gift given to some people, but it's also a skill that can be developed over time. And I think leadership is across the board. And even in my class, I talk about I could go to a company or business down the road and teach a lot of leadership because there's a lot of transferable concepts. Now, ultimately, I believe that it derives from like the kingdom of God, and Jesus shows us how to do leadership better than anyone. But it is accessible or applicable to many different settings. And so let's just start off with what is leadership. And this is, there have been, I think it's John Maxwell, which is
John
it?
Maxwell.
Okay, good, because that would be someone I did not want to misquote. Which, by the way, Pastor John, our lead pastor, is kind of a third generation
but it's like kind of like a
person that's been developed by John Maxwell. So John Maxwell developed Kevin Myers, Pastor Kevin Myers, who's been on the podcast. And then, of course, Kevin Myers had really mentored Pastor John. And so I think we're like fourth generation. So anyways, John Maxwell basically says leadership is nothing more, nothing less than influence. Like that you have influence over a person or a group of people. The way that we talk about it in class is leadership is the act of catalyzing movement in an individual or a group towards a desired goal or vision. So you are catalyzing movement. There's something happening in an individual or group, and it's movement towards a unified or desired outcome or vision. Like that's what that's the framework of most of our leadership. And so I guess let's just talk about like why is leadership important? Maybe misconceptions. Just kind of leave it open. So you want to just kick us off. Why is it important? Why are we talking about this?
I'm excited to hear what she says.
Yes.
Yeah, I am. What stands out to me as being really important is you're saying you're going to a desired vision. And so someone has to have some idea of where you're going, or you're just floundering. Like, why are you even bothering to try to do something if you're not intentionally aiming somewhere? Yep. And I think it's really important that the leader has a vision, but is also able to share that, and that it's a vision that advances everyone. Like it's not just, this is going to make me look really good, but that is for the good of all of the people or the organization.
Well, we talk about it. I talk about this in one of our lectures, that if the leader does not communicate that vision, set that direction, then oftentimes it's the most negative and loud dissenting voice.
The people will choose a way to go.
Somebody will make one up.
It's like there's always going to be leadership in a group or organization. And that's one of the weaknesses, and we talk about, this is really bad, but on like committees, like oftentimes committees, the person who's leading the committee is often the person that is the most negative, the most loud, and the most kind of like the dissenting voice. And so that's why it's so important that leadership has a communicated vision. That, hey, this is where we're going. This is how it involves all of us holistically. Yes. And then ultimately, in our context, we're saying, here's how it furthers the kingdom of God. Here's how this lines up with the mission of God as we see throughout all of Scripture.
Yeah, I even kind of relating to Scripture. If you trace through Scripture, there's like a constant theme of a leader is appointed, and God gives them a vision or directive, and then it is their job to go on behalf of the people, communicate that vision and directive, and then push them forward. So it's like Moses, Gideon, and then even as you fast forward even further into the New Testament Jesus gives us the directive of like, go and make disciples.
I will say, as we're talking about kind of setting up this concept, one of the big misconceptions, and we see this a lot, especially within the Institute as we're developing and trying to equip these young leaders, is sometimes people will equate leadership with management.
Yeah.
And they're very similar. There's overlaps because, if leadership is influence, then obviously management has an aspect of leadership in it.
Yeah.
But I think one of the areas that we come up across a lot is helping people see that there is a difference between leadership and management. And you're like, well, what do you mean? Well, when you think management, you almost think of like making sure when the trains run on time. Like, hey, there's or a project manager.
Yeah.
Even in the corporate world, like the project manager is a very common thing, and they are making sure that certain tasks are being done and certain communication is being, so that things are moving forward, that the trains are running on time, that things are getting to where they should be getting done. Does that make sense? And that's management, which does involve an aspect of leadership. But leadership is different because it does require a certain level of skill set and competencies, because you're not just trying to get things done. You're actually, going back to what you said, Lisa, you're setting a vision, which means you're actually looking to the future. You're seeing a preferred picture of how things could be, right? So you understand the reality of where they are now, but you also say, hey, I've kind of peeked into the future, right? And there's this vision of what it could be, and I'm going to help lead or catalyze movement of these people towards that. And there's a little, now, does that involve aspects of management? Yes.
Yeah.
But they are different. How do you?
Yeah, I was about to say, I think it's funny that I think this is a place that you've challenged me a lot. So for those who don't know, I work directly under Brett. So, I get to work under your leadership, and
Are you going to evaluate my leadership?
No. I'm about to say, you've challenged me.
Get ready.
I think when I started my residency here, and then now that I work here, I think when I got here, I thought leadership was making friends and getting tasks done. And I thought I was a good leader because people liked me and I could get stuff done. Which both those are you need to have people like you, or not necessarily like you, but you need to be able to connect with people and you need to be able to get stuff done. But leadership's more than that, in the sense of, so in our context, I'm not necessarily leading and changing and making these massive decisions to reframe all of Waymaker Institute, but I am, with the things that I've been given.
Yes.
Sensing, all right, what maybe what needs to get, I guess, changed a little bit or pressed in here. And again, I'm not just doing tasks done, but I'm actually okay, we need to make sure our residents are hearing this thing right now, or we need to prepare for our summer internship. And actually, what's the aim and goal of our summer internship? Are we producing what we want to produce? Our professors, are they getting the vision of what Waymaker Institute is? And just, it's more than just, again, a list of tasks. Or even getting other people to get tasks done, but helping sense the nuances to make sure everything's driving forward, or improving to produce what it is hoping to produce.
Yeah. And if you look into even the world, think about a management of a retail store or management of a restaurant.
Yeah.
Well, they are given essentially a list of expectations and responsibilities, and probably a list of people that they're to manage to make sure that they show up on work. They're scheduled to work.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
They show up on time to work, that they're given expectations. But oftentimes that's where it stops. And so we were saying leadership would be another level where it's like, hey, there's something even bigger going on than just making sure we have people scheduled and making sure these expectations are done. But we're actually going to accomplish something that's bigger than all of us. And that's sometimes the challenge of like working in retail or working in the restaurant business, which I did for a couple, a year or two. Anyways, so there is a difference. How do you interpret or engage with the difference between those two, or have you experienced, I don't know, the contrast between those two things?
Yeah, I think that if you manage and you've just been told like you have responsibilities, then it's really easy to just fall into, now I tell people what to do so I don't get in trouble.
Yeah.
And when you move that step into leadership, it's not, I'm going to tell you what to do. Like, I want to equip you, not to have a pun there with what we're trying to do, but I want to equip you to where you can see some of this stuff on your own. It's not just me standing there saying, now do this, now do this, now do this. Like, that comes more intuitively when you take that extra step and you've got the vision and you can share it with other people.
Yep. And so I think a really good, kind of a cap to this part of this episode is sometimes people feel like they're leading, but really they're just managing, or they want or desire for leadership, and really probably what they've been wired or gifted to is management. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's not a like some are better than others.
Right.
And even if you go to scripture, it's like we all have different parts to play.
Yeah.
And when you start to put people in different roles and responsibilities that don't align with some of their giftings and wirings, that's really and I literally think about, and if you work in a company or organization, you know what I'm talking about. But there's this honestly, it is I don't think it's the best thinking where you look within, let's say you take a company and you take the highest performers in that company and then you promote them to leadership.
Yes.
Right? And that's like, well,
it's assumption that they can then lead everyone else.
Right.
They can do, but
and the problem is you can't, you can't equate those, because a high performer may just be in the right seat on the bus and needs to be there and to continue to like fan that flame. Or you could take maybe an average performer and they actually could be a really great leader because that's how they're wired or gifted. And so that's why understanding what leadership is, unpacking is really important, especially if you're in a place of leadership and you lead people. To understand the concept is really helpful for your organization, your church, your group, or whatnot. So, all right, so let's talk about, if let's say someone's listening and they say, hey, I believe I am a leader, or I have the desire to lead. Where do you start?
Yeah, I mean, where we start in our classes is the idea of self-leadership. Yeah. And this is not meant to be like gotcha. But, I think the reality is, like, if you can't...
It feels like a little bit.
A little bit, yeah.
But it's not.
Yeah, but really the first step to leading anyone is leading yourself. And I think that goes not just in leadership, but really all aspects of life. Like, if you're not able to get yourself out of bed, show up on time, look reasonable, get your own stuff done, be responsible for your own life, like, you're not going to motivate or be able to catalyze or influence others to do the same thing, or at least in a positive direction.
Yes. Maybe
you'll influence them negatively if you have a strong personality, but in the positive direction. And it's always funny when we work with our institute students. I think then they come in, they think like, all right, I'm going to get up there and I'm going to do all of these exciting things right away. But it's always for them, their first steps are like, oh, wow, I have to get I need to become more organized. I need to get my schedule set. I need to learn what my routines are. And when they do that, then they're beginning to take care of themselves and they actually begin to put themselves in a position to then become someone who can lead other people, because they have all their stuff together. I mean, they're not like perfect, but they're getting their stuff in order to then be able to care about other people.
Yeah, and that we are very, very intentional and adamant on the fact that if we don't help them learn what it looks like to lead themselves, then they could do some major harm to others. And I think there is a temptation to promote or exalt people into leadership, even because they have a gift. Like, man, they have a gift of leadership. Like, everywhere they go, people follow. And there are some like that. But without self-leadership, there's and we'll get into what that is. But without that, what we're trying to say is we want to look 10, 20, 30 years down the road and ensure that they've been equipped. There's that word again.
There we go.
Yeah.
With the right.
There's a reason we chose that name.
Yeah, that is true. It's just so easy. So leadership is this, or self-leadership. Sorry. It's the process to lead yourself through seeking self-understanding. So in self-leadership, there's this aspect of self-understanding or self-discovery, which, again, I know that I say that and, like, a bunch of, like, I don't know the right term. What term do you guys think of when, like, self-discovery? And
well, I mean,
it's on a podcast.
It can have a negative connotation of like, oh, we're just about like learning about ourselves and
yes,
actually
it's very self-centered.
Yes, yes. Like this isn't about, hey, this is all about us, but it is saying, even though I've lived as Brett for 30 some years, there's still so much of me I have to understand and discover, especially in light of God, which that's kind of the always thing. So self-leadership is this seeking self-understanding of who we are in light of who God is, how he has gifted and wired us, the unique personalities, even our history and the things we've experienced, the good and the bad things. Like, all of that helps to form self-leadership. There's aspects of your worldview, how you see the world and how you process things. So we help students articulate their worldview. There's aspects of values, like what value system do you live out of? That's part of self-leadership. Life purpose, like, okay, what purpose has God given you? Divine insights. Where are moments that God has allowed you a peek into what he's called you to, or to how he's gifted you, or what purpose? These are all aspects. So self-understanding is knowing your gifts, your story, your calling, so that you can live a more self-disciplined life, or a more on-purpose life, if that makes sense. Lisa, when you were an intern, like, you were married and had 4 kids, and you were working on, like, seminary work. So there's a lot that you were ahead of many in regards to maturity, because you've lived life, right. Like, you've had to. So I'm curious of, like, how you've kind of approach your viewpoint on, like, self-leadership, knowing that, like, you're coming in, you've had this family, right? And yet you're still stepping into a developmental environment and trying to figure out what God's wanting to do in your life. Yeah, how do you approach this subject?
Yeah, it was funny when I started working at the office. I realized so many of the things, one, that you were talking to the interns about, and 2, that just kept coming up in staff meetings. I was like, oh, I learned how to do those things when I had a bunch of little babies, and the world was absolute chaos. And I was like, if I don't figure out a few things for myself, like, I might actually go crazy.
Yep.
And so it's just been really funny to me. I did some of those things, before I got married and before I had kids, but they weren't really named. Like, no one said, hey, this is what we're doing, and here's why, and here's how it's going to help you. And I kind of had to flail my way through that, just so we wanted to do things on purpose with our family and with our kids. And even, like, the approach that I was taking with work that I did then, if I did not learn those skills, I couldn't do any of those things.
Yep. Yeah, because you, like you said, you were doing these things, but it's not necessarily they had the subject line of, like, self-leadership,
right,
and self-understanding. Because the moment you got married, right, the moment all of us said I do, we now walked into this, this, what Scripture talks about, this one flesh relationship where now we're like in face to face in the mirror with someone where, like, before we could run away from or hide or ignore all of our faults and all of our sinfulness and all of our selfishness and all of our pride and all of the unholy, nasty, sinful parts of us. Now we had this person that we could not run away from it anymore.
Not just that, who's now affected by all of it too.
Yes.
Like, it actually has
Every
an
day.
impact on them.
Every day, right? So now self-leadership is saying, what am I going to do with that?
Yeah.
Right? And some people decide to ignore it or run from it. And of course, that doesn't go well. And then the next level, and it's like God gives us these moments of self-understanding. We have kids. And now, not only
it's like a whole new,
we don't have just someone who's affected by it, but now we actually have this mini me that is demonstrating, especially like biological kids that are demonstrating some of the even like generational strongholds and sin cycles and all of our sinfulness pre-Jesus in them that we're having to confront. And this isn't a parenting episode, but a lot of times the problem that parents have in their kids is really the problems that they have with themselves. And so we get to now on another level go to understand ourselves. Like, where do I need Jesus?
And I think when it comes to the self-understanding, just because you don't know and name things doesn't mean they're not there. And I think we try to take that route a lot. It's like if I go on this journey and I'm going to understand some of how God made me and part of my story and how he's gifted me and asked me to participate in what he's doing, it's like I have to take a lot of responsibility. Like, God's going to ask me to do something with that. And I mean, let's be real. It'd be easier to just not bother. Right? Like, we're going to sit on the couch with our Cheetos and watch Netflix and not worry about our lack of discipline or our poor habits or like our personal formation. Okay. So then to that point, right? So self-leadership is not just saying, oh yeah, here's all my baggage and all my crap and all my sinfulness. What does it enable us to do? What's kind of the action aspect of self-leadership?
Well, I think there's a continual understanding of what we need to do personally to allow ourselves to position ourselves best to lead other people. And I just think, like, so just make this really practical. You probably don't remember this conversation. If I refer to most of my leadership interactions, it's going to be with Brett, because that's been 99% of my leadership. And fortunately for him, it's basically all been good. And when I say basically, I mean all been good. Okay, so he is really one of the best leaders I've worked on, or probably the best leader I've worked under, honestly. But anyways, I don't know, you probably don't remember this conversation. A few months ago, I think you'd probably set aside, kind of hit like maybe a rut or a wall in like my being able to get things done and like organize and structure, and how I was kind of like, I just seemed like I was kind of disorganized. And you were like, hey, what's your task management system? And I was like, this right now. And you were like, hey, you should probably try this, or like work on that thing, because I see this little thing of you being able to organize your tasks and get vision and build them out and understand how to be able to build out projects for yourself is like, okay, not only is that affecting your work, but now it's like affecting how you're leading other people, because you're not having this rhythm of, and then you were like, hey, you should probably create a rhythm of being able to like look forward and then being able to build out what that would look like to build that forward and actually get practical with it. And really all it was, hey, you're not doing a bad job in terms of like you're interacting with our students well, but just fix this little tweak of being more organized with your task management and that little self-leadership thing that. And so I did. I got, found on the app, got all that stuff. And that little tweak of self-leadership then allowed me to now be more organized and more structured. And a lot of times it's as simple as that, is, hey, what's the little rhythm or the little practice I need to implement that's just going to help me be a little more aware or more intentional or more practical with the things I'm trying to go after.
And I think I was able to do that because I know you.
Right, yeah. We've
had those conversations of your wirings and your defaults.
Exactly.
When you're not living like a spirit-led life, there's these tendencies.
And even with that, like, I've done the self-understanding to know where my flesh pushes me towards. And when I'm not in my, like, when I'm not taking care of myself, where I begin to go towards, and then I've expressed those, I've made that public to be accountable and all of that. And so that I know that when I'm in a bad spot, I get super lazy, or I forget things, or I'm not super detailed. And so I know that, like, okay, I need to make sure I'm structured, create those rhythms, be intentional. Otherwise, I'll kind of go about whatever task looks fun and doesn't lead to getting a lot of things done.
Yep. So. Yeah. So and so as a leader, I was helping you to identify something practically that I knew was holding you back from being able to accomplish what you as a leader are trying to accomplish. And so to kind of wrap up this segment of like self-leadership, the reality is it is a journey of self-understanding, not for the sake of just building ourselves up and knowing stuff. But when we do that, it then allows us where we know where the gospel needs to be applied to our lives, right? Mm-hmm. We know, like we like I know I need Jesus, right? And I need the gospel, but there needs to be specific ways in which it has to be applied to my life. Yeah. Because there's areas I need to be sanctified and grow. And also self-leadership, self-understanding leads us to the practice of disciplines. In that we know, when I know myself, I know there are certain disciplines I need to do that help me live that helps me steward my life better. Yep. Helps me understand that I've been created on purpose and for purpose, and I can live with that intentionality. Yeah. And all of that is a lifelong journey, but it especially is important in your 20s, I would say.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yes.
And so that you can better lead other people. Yeah. And to fast forward, to not do self-leadership to lead other people, that means eventually the end of your story will look something like this. The leadership pressure that is applied to your life will then cause certain things that were left unhealed or undealt with or untransformed in you to spill out. Yeah. And now it won't just affect you and your family, which are really important. It now affects anyone that is now in your leadership circle or influence, which is why the longer that you go without self-leadership, the more harm that it is.
I think of the visual I get is a sinkhole, where a sinkhole is basically there's a body of water that runs underneath the ground and is just running for a long time until eventually the ground gives way so much that just basically literally a sinkhole, if you look it up, it just is, the ground just collapses. Yeah. And you don't know it's there until it's there. Yep. And I think there's a lot of people who lead not having checked their motivations, or they're hurt, or done self-understanding, or even the practical things that they know that they need to do to be the best leader. And then one day it shows up, and it's like, when it does, it's never good.
Yep.
You're not hiding it.
Yeah.
No. But we say, and again, if you're listening to this, you're probably thinking of specific people, but there's a lot of people, a lot of grown people who are leading like the middle school them.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. They're responding to situations, they're making decisions, and they're speaking, and internally what's actually causing that or motivating that is the middle school them.
Yeah. The memory or the thing that happened back then that they're now is causing some motivation forward.
And what we find is that when we walk students through the self-leadership
the most powerful things we do every year.
Oh, it is powerful. There are usually tears, right? There's usually a lot of healing that's done. Yeah. And every time I just smiled because I know, man, if you desire to be leadership, this is where it begins, and you need to go on this journey for a long time. The spiritual parallel to this is, we've talked about this in other episodes, but we cannot expect the kingdom of God to prevail through us or to move through us until it actually takes precedence or prevails in us. Yeah. Meaning that there has to be that transformation of God's kingdom and his power and his gospel in us to then move through us. And I think that's what we're meaning when we say self-leadership before the leadership of other people. Yeah. And how do you know you're ready? I don't know. It's a never going process.
Well, yeah, I think it's always we always say rinse and repeat. Yeah. When I think as you grow, you get more responsibility, or you gain more influence or more pressure. There's always that next level we need to go to, and I think a lot of people, where they get hung up, or where maybe they fail, I don't know if that's the right word, or where they stop is, and I think that's where kind of I was like, okay, we need to rinse and repeat this. You've gained new pressure. We need to figure this out. And so there's new levels I needed to go to become a better leader, because I had new responsibility than previous seasons.
Yeah. So we're going to kind of shift gears now and talk about, so oftentimes when people like listen or probably listen to this now, they may not be the point leader in their church or their organization.
Yeah.
And so there is this aspect of how do you influence and have leadership when you're not like the point one, when you're not the one making all the decisions or setting the vision. And this is really important. Clay Scroggins, or Scroggins.
Scroggins.
Thank you. Clay Scroggins. Sorry, bud. As if we're like best friends.
If he's listening.
He's going to hear it.
He's okay. He's probably not listening, but if he does, Clay Scroggins wrote a book, How to Lead When You're Not in Charge, and he's part of the North Point community. I remember listening to his podcast with Danny Stanley, where he like really first kind of talked about these things. So some of the content we're getting ready to talk about comes from that book, and then others I've kind
things we've learned,
morphed and learned and tweaked along the way. And so I think this is really important. So if you're like a note taker, these things would be really important in an organization.
This is where most people, this is where we exist, right?
And I think most people find
this is where
most
people find
only a few people are actually like the one that's in charge.
In fact, I'm heading to an organization tomorrow to talk to a department within the organization about this topic. Like, what do you do when you're not the point person? What do you do when there's changes and you're like wrestling with the changes and that kind of stuff? And it's like, and I'm going to teach this to them, and just like we teach all of our students and anyone that comes through. So, how do you lead, or even what's your posture when you work within an organization or part of a community or part of a church? And here are a couple things. I think there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So let's jump in. Number 1, what's the first one, Tanner? Oh, choose positivity over negativity. Talk to us about that one.
He did that because I don't have the notes in front of me. I was looking at. Fortunately, I could see his iPad, so I was
okay. Yeah. So the first one is choose positivity over negativity.
Yeah. I think this is something again we run into with a lot of interns or residents, or probably mainly interns, honestly, when they first start. It's easy to see all the things that you don't agree with. And it's actually really easy to be negative.
Yep.
But I think the posture of, okay, what can I agree with? And first of all, we always have the conversation of like, hey, you're not in charge, right? You need to recognize that. So there is a recognition, first of all, like, hey, you aren't the ones that get to make the decision. But yeah, just having the attitude of like, all right, I'm going to choose to see what is working and what is going well versus just all of the bad things that I see. And when I say bad things, I just like all of the usually preferences, all the things that I would prefer.
Yep.
It's funny, when I first started coming here, I was just in myself not in a great position, and I was just so negative about all the stuff about, and all of it was preferences about this church. It was like, oh, I don't like how they do this. I don't like how we do this. I don't like. I would do it this way, as if I was in some position to ever be able to lead something like this, to make those decisions. But it was funny. As soon as I made those positive shifts, like, okay, what is actually going on? What's well? It's like I slowly started to actually gain influence in my serving positions and just got to know more people. And then, long story short, ended up on staff here. Yeah. And that shift is significant. Even just the vibe you bring into, which I don't know if the vibe is the right word.
Well, no, I think that's
the culture.
I actually think that's, this idea of positivity over negativity is, that is a choice I believe we get to make. Yeah. And it is the way in which you enter into a space, I feel like, in some ways.
100%.
Whether it's a meeting or just an environment, there is a certain attitude, or, you can say even like an energy or a posture that And again, we say this and people are like, oh, yeah, that person I work with, or all of those. It's like, yeah, because in our culture, in our world, especially with social media, it is so easy to be the negative critic because there's barely any backlash. You just put it out there and like, oh yeah, I want to be a voice of a critic or negativity, and that's easy. But we're saying, hey, don't choose easy. Like, choose positivity. Now, it doesn't mean you don't point out when things are wrong.
You don't want to ignore all the problems you see.
Ignore something that's unhealthy or whatnot. But it is more of a mindset or a posture. The second one is very similar, and that is choose critical thinking. Or choose critical thinking over a critical spirit. So critical thinking over critical spirit. When you think about those two things, what do you think differentiates those?
Yeah, when in seminary, you have to write critical book reviews.
Okay.
And what they don't mean is, hey, come in and trash the book. Right? Like the whole goal. Now, occasionally you're going to say, hey, I disagree, and here's why. But a lot of it is actually evaluating it. What's great? What do I agree with? Where do I think like this needs more work? Like this argument needs to be developed better. What do I disagree with? And I think you can bring that critical thinking. Like we're not asking people to check their brains at the door. We're just going to smile and be like, everything's great. That's not that doesn't help anything. But there is a difference in we are trying to build something versus we are trying to destroy something. And to me, that's the difference. Like, if you are going to build something, you have to acknowledge, okay, here's the faults. Here's the places this could go wrong. But you do that in service of the thing you're building.
Yes.
And so when you come in with a critical spirit, you really just, it's like,
you just want to see things burn.
That's right.
Honestly.
That's right. I'm going to light this on fire, and I'm going to watch.
And I think that's the distinguishing point is critical thinking says, if I point out something wrong, it will be hopefully with some possible solutions and for the success of the whole. A critical spirit really just wants to be heard, wants probably it to fail, and they're fine with just like vomiting all of the negativity and then just almost kind of backing away. And they're coming with their clipboard list of things before maybe the leader's even finished talking about like a potential change or a new product or a new direction. They're just like, it's like, okay, here's my list of all the things that will be wrong, and then here you go. Yeah,
I think it's the best practice of if you see a problem, before proposing it to maybe someone who's higher up, think of a possible solution. And that might not be the solution to go with, but it always, I think, just looks better to be like, hey, I have this, I see this, and like it would be it's not helpful for me to be like, man, Brett, we stink at getting Waymaker Institute out to other people. Like, we just need to get it out to other people. Like, what do we do? Like, why are we doing this? You'd be like, okay, thanks, Tanner. Like, I don't need you to have me. But like, instead of me coming up, be like, hey, I think we should connect with this group of people, or we should, that's a critical thinking of, I see this issue, but hey, I've at least proposed a solution versus just saying, we stink at this. And that's like, okay, thank you. That doesn't do anything. It doesn't help anyone out.
Yeah. I think when I think of critical spirit, I think of the Joker in the Dark Knight series, where he was just like, he's just like, I just want the city to burn.
Watch the world burn.
Yeah, there's no other purpose other than, and I know it's a really extreme, but the critical spirit is always looking for something that's wrong, and the irony is, you always find what you're looking for. Right. If you want to look for something wrong, you're always going to find something wrong. And even as a leader myself, walking into, let's just say, church, I have to be really mindful that I always want to make things better, right? Because I'm a leader and it's something built into me. It's just a gift. And so I have to be mindful that I'm not coming with the critical spirit to just nitpick and point out everything out, that I'm actually able to, in that case, like, be part of the church family and body, and to worship and to receive and so forth. Yeah. So, but it is a difference between a towel and a clipboard. I believe what Clay was, I remember him talking about on a podcast where towel says, hey, here's something that might need to change. I want to serve. I want to help do that. Or here's some ideas. The clipboard is just like, okay, I'm going to find something wrong, and I'm just going to hand you over the list, and you take care of it. Okay. The next thing is this choose we over me, which again is so anti a lot of organizations. And here's the deal: the church is not exempt from this. Meaning, a lot of churches, there's a me versus others mentality within the church organization or within the group of people, which really is just a pride. It's a preference. You mentioned it's a selfish posture. Even
self-protection, like trying to make sure we stay in the good light.
Yes. And so when you're in any group of people and you're not the point leader, or even if you are the point leader, honestly, there's this aspect of, hey, we should choose we over me, meaning I want to see the progress of the whole versus the exaltation of me, or the raising up of me specifically. One of the really practical ways to do that is to be the biggest cheerleader of everyone that you work with, including your boss. And And here's what I love. You know, and again, I've had the privilege of being able to interact with a lot of different church staffs and a lot of different organization staffs. And what I love about the staff of our church is that this is a big deal. We cheerlead other people. Like we shout out people all the time. And the reason that some organizations struggle with that is because if I shout them out, they may get the thing, the raise or the promotion or the more influence or, you know, I want people to recognize what I'm doing. And this is a kingdom concept, but the reality is we should be uplifting other people and trying to like, man, look at that. Let's recognize that. So this is a big one. How does this connect with you, Lisa?
I can tell this is something that the church has this church, Waymaker Church in specific, has focused on, because in my the job description for the job that I ended up applying for, it said fight territorialism. Now, my husband was looking over my shoulder and he thought it said fight terrorism. So he had a few questions.
Well, that's not
right.
No.
What are you signing up for?
Right? He's like, I have a few questions. Let's back up.
Yeah, you are the unique terrorism department.
That's right. So that's an undercover department that we have on staff, right? You can tell that's something that we have intentionally tried to grow here. And it does show in how the staff interacts with each other. But that's something that people can take into wherever they are. You can do that in your marriage.
Yes.
That might be shocking for some people.
Yes.
You know, like if you tried that. You can take that anywhere you go, whether it's at work or just in your relationships, and it'll make a big difference.
Yep. I love that. And the reality is, choosing like we over me is a humble posture, and Scripture makes it really clear how God interacts with humble or humility versus pride. Yeah. And in humility, God like leans in and he lifts up, right? And in pride, he actually opposes. Yeah. And the picture that I always get in my mind and I communicate, is the moment I choose me or a prideful posture in anything, I am stepping into the boxing ring, opposite corner of the creator of the heavens and the earth. Yeah. Right. And that's not too extreme. Like that is the reality of it. And yet I still, that's my
which is a fight you're probably going to lose.
Yeah. Yes, that is true. That is true. But it's also, I had to be mindful because of my own self-understanding, recognizing that it is one of my biggest pitfalls within my personality and my tendency. And I have to continue to say, this cannot be about my self-promotion. And I have to choose a we mentality, which is really, really important. So God exalts the humble and he opposes the proud. Yeah. And that's there's a lot that can be said to that. The second to last one is choose flexibility over being rigid. And this is a big one. And in fact, I would say in some ways, it's even what God is personally teaching me at a new level, and that is to hold things loosely, right? So there is a temptation within leadership to have a tight grip on things, to have the illusion of control, that we have control over something. And usually that means we're going to fight against change, or if we feel threatened, you talk about self-protection. Yeah. We just want to like, okay, no, I need to have control over this. I need to be rigid. If an outside, something is going to force change, I have to like fight against it. And what God's really teaching me is that to be open-handed, to hold things loosely, actually lives in this recognition that God is sovereign, that he is controlled, that I don't have to control everything, and that actually when I hold things loosely, when I'm flexible, it allows God to remove things that need to be removed, and actually allows him to then give me things that I need, versus close grip. So how does your personality interact with this?
Well, yeah. First of all, I would say I'm a pretty flexible person as is, and Lisa's gonna laugh because I just talked about it. I was like, well, we'll figure it out. Like I'm just pretty easygoing with that stuff. But so first, before I get into that real fast too, I just want to point out that every one of these things is a mentality, and every single person has the ability to take on these things.
Yes.
Right? There's no.
It's a choice.
There's
Choice
no
and mentality.
it's not personality. It's not gifting. It's not skills. This is a mentality that you can choose to fight for. And so, even with flexibility, I think. Some personalities are going to be more like, I want to be by the book and go straight, like A to B plus C, go in order. And then some personalities might be more like me that enjoy going rogue, enjoy the changes, are fine with it. Yeah. And I think what I've learned with this is someone who doesn't always get to make the decisions ahead of me. I think some of the reasons I've done well in certain positions, it's because I've accepted the challenges that flexibility or that changes can offer kind of in stride and just said, hey, let's go for it. We'll figure it out, And I think, if you're someone who struggles with change, I think it's okay to admit that, hey, this frustrates me. Or if anything, you might need to tell your supervisor or maybe your spouse or whoever you're close with that's causing the changes, hey, this frustrates me. But that doesn't mean you are then going to hold on to it tightly. You can still have the posture of flexibility of being, you know what, I'm going to go with it. We're going to go with it. We're going to figure it out. I'm going to do whatever I can, and even ask the question of, all right, how can I serve in this, right? I think one of the reasons our church staff, we are able to survive and manage and even make it through the season of COVID and then jumping into a building is because we just had a lot of people who are like, hey, whatever's needed of me, right? Yeah, and I was doing things far off my job description, right? Yeah. And most people were.
Well, it was how can I serve?
Yeah.
It was truly a posture of like, hey, how can I serve? This may not be on my job description, but how can I serve? Now, that was necessary. And that can get to all of these can be unhealthy. But for most people, the reality is that's a great, how can I serve? Open-handedness.
Yeah, I remember even one of the first things that Pastor John said, like when we were going into the season of COVID and a new building and all of this change, it's just like, we don't know what we're doing. And, it was just like, hey, if you have the response of this isn't my job description, it's like, that might be a problem. Yeah. And you just really champion this spirit of flexibility of, hey, we're not going to abuse you for everything, but you need to be willing to serve or to change on the fly or just do something that's super random, like move, I don't know, granite countertops, which is not what I signed up to do when I got into ministry, but that's what we were doing. Really heavy granite tops, and that's just what was needed.
Yeah, and a lot of people, they this idea of flexibility versus being rigid comes into play with change, and I think even different personalities, like you said, interact with or deal with change differently. And what I teach in our class is that change is really vital for any organization. In fact, as a living organism, right? There's nothing is ever static. You're either growing or declining, right? There's either growth and health, or there's the unhealth and there's sickness or decay. And so change is a necessary thing within any group of people. Yeah. And in fact, not every change is good, but most momentum, most good growth things come because a change was implemented. Yeah. And so if you're listening to this, how you respond to that change is what we're talking about. And again, hey, be a critical thinker, right? Say, hey, here's some potential downfalls and here's some solutions, but at the same time, I'm going to choose to be flexible.
I even think too, this doesn't, I think with a lot of these, we're not just trying to say, hey, always be like a yes man or nod your head and never push back or never, but rather to the masses display these, be positive or fight for we, not territorialism, or be flexible, and then in the proper channels to communicate maybe the issues you might have with something or frustration or in the proper places, and not just having a overall spirit of negativity or being critical or rigid, because that people will pick up on that quickly.
So the final one is, I would say, one of the biggest ones in regards to a mindset, and I feel like when I interact with someone who lives this out, I'm attracted to them. It's like I gravitate towards them. When I interact with someone who doesn't live this out, the opposite, it's a repellent. Very much like pride. I mean, it comes from this idea of pride versus humility. But the final one is this: choose gratitude over entitlement. Lisa, is that important?
Yeah. Maybe a little.
Yes.
There was a book that I read recently that talked about like one of the markers of spiritual maturity was how much gratitude that you had for things.
Yeah.
Whoever it was, and it might have been the book that you recommended.
I'm pretty sure it was Sacred Fire.
Okay. Yeah. He said it twice. Like when I read it the second time, I went back and found the first one. I was like, he felt like this was important enough that he just made the same point in two entirely different places in the book. Like cultivating that knowledge that all that we have is a gift from God. Like that will cause you to live from a completely different place, which also means that you're going to work from a different place and you're going to lead from a different place than if you go around thinking, well, I deserve to have this. Then you're going to be miserable because you're never going to have all the things that you think you deserve versus all of this is a gift.
Yes.
Like whether we do it for a short time or a long time, it's just a gift that we're here and we get to experience it and participate in what God's doing.
Which really comes from a theology.
Yes.
Right? Of what we believe about God.
Yep.
And what we believe about like ourselves.
Yes.
Right? And you know, if you ever find yourself in a season of a lot of complaining and a lot of like, man, I just wish things were different, or you just got a really like negative mindset. I bet if you trace it back, it comes to this place of you think you deserve, you said that I deserve this, which is entitlement. And so like, what do you think, Lisa, if you get, like, how do you, even talking about the idea of theology and understanding God ourselves, how do you shift from entitlement to gratitude? How would you do that?
I think a lot of times we start all of our stories about the gospel or about theology with us. And we shouldn't do that because that's not where the story starts, right? Like even God's creation of the world was a gift. Like I have all of this love that's shared in the Trinity, and it's an outflowing of that love and that joy and that communion. And if you start with God instead of starting with yourself, that's the shift that you can make in really most areas of theology. Is this a theology that's oriented around me, which I think is really common in especially the West. Like we're very individualistic.
Which leads to entitlement.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also all of these are intertwined, right? If you are choosing choosing yourself over the team, you probably also feel entitled.
Yeah.
But gratitude's one of those things that I think even when you're in a situation and you say, you know what, this isn't great. Like there's this trial, this thing that we're enduring, like no one's looking at that going, you know, the only reason you think that this shouldn't be this way is because you're entitled. Like, it's not even that. It's like, this actually is just genuinely horrible. I think one of the ways we get through that, displaying the love of Jesus, is by looking even for the things in that we can be grateful for.
Yeah. Yeah. Which doesn't take long to actually do, because there's aspects of like, if you have a job and can earn income, that is something to be really grateful for. Like, to live in a house and have food and clothes. I know it's like super simple, but and until you interact with people who don't have that, like it is hard. It's easy to take that for granted. I think about even going to like communion. I think Jesus like telling us to take communion often is to be often reminded of what he has given us, and that we have a lot to be grateful for. Because you know. And sometimes I even tell students, if it's been a while since you've taken communion, you might have the posture of entitlement to the salvation that you have. Because it forces us to be reminded of his body that was broken and his blood that was shed for me as a free gift. He bore that. I did not deserve it. I deserved something else completely. If we want to talk about being entitled. And even that fosters, I think Jesus knew that about humans, and it's like, do this often, because you're going to get quickly to entitlement versus gratitude. Any thoughts on this topic?
I think the exercise I like to go through is expectations versus reality. So a lot of times when I'm feeling entitled or frustrated or ungrateful for something, it's because I have this expectation of what I want to have. So I actually found myself in this where just because of our life situation, I spend a lot of my Fridays with watching my girls, and I was frustrated by all the things that kept me from. And it was this, I had these like, I felt entitled of like, I want to run during the day, I want to do this, or
it's my time,
or do more work even. Like I was like, I want to be able to do this. And I found myself in this place of like, oh no, I had this like expectation or this unrealistic expectation, and I was missing out on all the opportunity. And I had to remind myself, like, how many dads get the chance to spend a whole day with their kids, right? Just if you polled most dads in America, they don't have that chance. It's like, I get this chance. This is an opportunity to be really grateful. I get to spend a lot of intentional time with my girls. And so now I can actually better utilize it because now I'm grateful for it versus being entitled. I was being ungrateful for it and squandering it, right?
Yes.
And so
and nothing changed other than your perspective.
Exactly.
Which was a choice.
Yep.
Which sometimes that choice needs certain disciplines or rhythms to help our mind and our heart get there. But all of these are choices that can help you as a leader, but specifically when you're not the point person and the one in charge to be a better teammate, and whether it's in a church or an organization, in your family, in a community, you name it. So that's kind of the start. We got some more leadership stuff coming later, and so hopefully you guys will tune in. But that's today's episode on Beyond Survival.